Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 77 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We lied to you last week. We said we were going to talk about the last two episodes of House of the Dragon Season 1, but we had a trailer drop for the upcoming Season 2 of Rings of Power. It is just a teaser trailer, only 1 minute and 40-ish seconds long, but Sam and I have some Tolkien things we're going to talk about today. So this has become a Tolkien news update.
Tolkien takeover. Hashtag
Yes.
Tolkien takeover.
We're getting back to our roots. This is what our show usually has been about. Rings of Power was our initial topic for this podcast. So now it is nice to bring it back to Rings of Power. But unfortunately, we have to start with some sad news. Bernard Hill, unfortunately, our King Theoden, has passed away. We don't have much to say about this. I'm just going to say my point first, is that Theoden is my favorite character in both the book and film adaptation. So it was kind of sad to learn of his passing. But when you realize that Lord of the Rings came out 24 years ago, and it was filmed about 25 years ago, that was a long-ass time ago, Sam.
Yeah. I think he was in his 70s, 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall, but I remember during COVID, the cast of Lord of the Rings did a fundraising Zoom call, and he participated, and he was looking a little rough there, so he might have been getting frail. Of course, it's very sad. I don't know if I'm going to go as far as to say he's my favorite character, but especially his portrayal of Theoden is incredible in the film, and he will be missed. And I think it's been announced for a while now. They're going to do this War of the Rohirrim movie about Rohan. Would Theoden have been a character in that movie? I don't even recall the specifics, but if there was a chance of him participating, that would have been great. But I think that's probably maybe some other tributes that we can anticipate coming from the Tolkien community to honor him. But yeah, Bernard Hill, rest in peace.
Our next little tidbit that we wanted to update people on, or at least talk about ourselves, is that Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh, and Philippa Boyens are coming back as producers for a new Lord of the Rings property. And they're also writing it.
I was going to say they're going to write it too, which is the best part. Yeah.
And it is being directed by and starring Andy Serkis as Gollum. I am both very excited and very nervous at the same time for this film to come out. When I first told you about it, one of your first comments was the character you don't have to de-age.
Yeah.
Which is great because it's CGI and we know Andy Serkis can still do the voice. Hopefully he's fit enough to still do the motion capture for it. But I'm worried about which characters they're going to have be in this movie. I know it's called The Hunt for Gollum. So apparently it's going to take place between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. If we go back to this time period, the only characters that interact with Gollum in this Hunt for Gollum are
Aragorn,
Gandalf, and Gandalf.
And the Elves of Mirkwood.
Elves of Mirkwood, but we don't need to have Legolas directly tied into that. We could have a Lee Pace Thranduil come back.
Cool.
That'd be cool. But I don't know. I think it's an opportunity, the way I see it, to include new characters. I don't think we need any of those like legacy actors from The Lord of the Rings to come back. I would think it'd be cool to see Lee Pace if we get some Mirkwood action. But yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Sam?
So the trick is, are you going to do Gandalf with Ian McKellen? I don't think there's any question I don't think you could get away with doing Aragorn with Viggo. unless
I don't think you get away with Ian McKellen coming back as Gandalf anymore. It
that,
worked. It worked 10 years ago on The Hobbit, but even then he looked old. So I can't
yes.
imagine what throwing him in the makeup and prosthetics would look like now.
I mean,
And I love Ian McKellen, but
I
I
do
think
too.
he's
And
past his Gandalf age.
well, yeah, but he is Gandalf, right? And Vigo is Aragorn. I
That's
made
why I don't think you can use them.
but then how do you tell the story without getting really weird? It becomes like a fan fiction type thing where, oh, it's not Aragorn, it's, Barrethorn, and it's not Gandalf. We'll
Well,
do Radagast or something like that, right?
they clearly wouldn't do that. You
I know, but
dumbass.
I'm just being shitty. You opened up with my joke about de-aging, and that's true for Gollum, but could you de-age Gandalf? Could you, if you got Ian McKellen to, I'm assuming, go to New Zealand to do the filming, or maybe not, but could you
Like I say,
de-age him effectively?
they don't even film in New Zealand anymore.
Where do they do their? Where do they
Like
film it?
Rings of Power was in New Zealand season 1, but season 2 they said they were leaving New Zealand.
Oh yeah, because they got all those complaints from the English countryside residents about them destroying ant habitat or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Okay, so so you don't need to worry about Ian McKellen necessarily going to New Zealand, but I think you might be, if he's game to do it, you could probably DH him. I think the technology is good enough where you could get away with that because he's under prosthetics anyways. He's got the big bushy beard, got the big floppy hat. There's only so much you really need to do. And then hopefully, Peter Jackson has learned his lesson from how shitty the Hobbit trilogy looked and will film it in a way that is not otherwise distracting. And so the CGI is just to get Ian McKellen to look like the Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings timeline. I don't know about Vigo though. I don't know about
Yeah, there's
Aragorn.
that. I just don't think Vigo would do it. Because I believe when The Hobbit was being filmed, there was talk of Vigo Mortensen being in that as well. And I'm pretty sure Vigo has been like, this was a great period of my life. I'm very thankful for my time with Lord of the Rings, but that time has passed.
I mean,
I think that's his personal stance on the project.
so I mean, then maybe you go and you recast, which that's if you want to make a movie.
I would hate. So that's why I think you got to do somebody else.
Yeah,
A different character.
I mean, can you? I cannot think of an effective recasting. Let's see. The first thing that comes to mind is the Han Solo. What was it? The Aiden Ulrich, or whatever his name is.
Aaron Reich.
Aaron Reich. Yeah, and he's a fine actor. Otherwise, I thought he was really good in Hail Caesar, actually, which was a unheralded Coen Brothers movie. But the Solo movie there were a lot of things wrong with that. But I bought him as a young Han Solo. I don't know. I think the one of the things that would work in your favor is that you're not remaking the Lord of the Rings with new actors, right? So you don't have to. This is not going to be Aragorn putting down the ranger and becoming the king. This is Aragorn as the ranger. This is Aragorn out in the muck wrestling with Gollum. A younger character or a younger actor, a new actor, it's possible. If you got to pick the right person,
Yeah,
right? You got to pick somebody who can make it their own and make it seem real.
Aragorn doesn't age like a normal man though, so he would still. But then again, so you're just going to come up with like lore things that in my head, Aragorn is Vigo Mortensen. So
The Hobbit takes place, what was it, 60 years before the Lord of the Rings, the main action Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, but the hunt for Gollum doesn't take place until closer to.
That's like 20 years.
Yeah.
Maybe even less.
So instead of being 87 or whatever he is in Lord of the Rings, he'd be 67.
Yeah, so there's really not that much difference. So I don't know. We'll see. I think I'm going to watch it regardless if it gets made and comes out. I mean,
what makes me excited is having Andy Serkis direct and then having that production and writing team.
Yeah. I love those four names, and I trust them to come out with a movie that I will enjoy. And it'd be great to like put it into the same space as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Reserve judgment for when it comes out, but I think they could pull it off with new actors. It wouldn't piss me off.
I'd be pissed off.
Well, okay. Now, the real reason that we called this emergency podcast. Rings of Power, season 2 trailer dropped. It is 1 minute and 43 seconds of non-stop, mouth-watering action.
Yeah,
consider me teased.
Let's not give our overall thoughts until the end, after we've talked through each of the points. So Sam and I, right before we started recording, we rewatched the 1:40 long teaser trailer, and we kind of broke it down scene for scene. Now, it's a teaser trailer, so they give you very brief snippets of many different scenes throughout the season. It's probably misleading in a few instances, but we will kind of break it down for you and give our interpretation of what we think people are talking about, what we're seeing, and that you can follow along and watch it afterwards and see how you feel about the trailer. But to begin, the trailer starts with a reprise of the season 1 ending. So we see Halbrand walking towards the plains of Gorgoroth after Mount Doom has initially exploded, which was our culminating scene at the end of season 1.
I don't know if it's like a reuse shot completely, but nothing new here. And then we cut to Khazad-dûm, seemingly, and Durin, and he is saying an ancient evil has returned. And Sean, you instantly said this is the Balrog. And
yeah, I think they're trying to get you to think that he's talking about Sauron, but we very clearly saw the Balrog and delving too deep and all of that. So yeah,
I agree with you there. Okay, and then we cut to a scene. I think it's in the woods, maybe. The ground looked rocky and mossy, maybe some roots or something like that. But then you get this really weird, kind of like I described it as a worm monster. You said it looked like venom. So he kind of has what could be, what are the pseudopods, all kind of coiling and roiling together, and it seems to be kind of moving. It reminded me of some monsters in D&D as well. These kind of larger creatures made up of worms that kind of move together, and it seems like it's menacing. But then we didn't
look like a good guy. I think
didn't look like a good guy. That's for sure. Didn't look like a good guy. And then we cut to Galadriel saying, "Prepare yourselves," and I think she has a sword, and she's with Elrond and some other elves, and they're drawing their weapons, and one of them draws a bow. Oh, Milva, that's the character from The Witcher, the archer. Okay, one of the characters in their party reminded us of Milva from The Witcher, but neither of us could remember her name at this point. Anyway, so they kind of have this like Avengers scene of them all getting their weapons ready, and then we paused and rewatched the scene a couple times, and in one of the stills, you can see 2 figures in the background coming at this group of elves, seemingly, and their eyes were glowing and their forms were a little hard to make out, as if they could have been ghosts or spirits or incorporeal. Sean, you thought they might have been, well, the first thing you said was Nazgul, but they can't be Nazgul at this point, we don't think. Where else are you with this?
I mean, we have examples of evil spirit creatures from season 1, like those 3 priestesses. So it could be something along those lines. You mentioned barrow rights.
Yeah, I think they talk about how the Witch King of Angmar sent spirits, evil spirits, to possess or to occupy the barrows, and that's what actually animates the barrow wights. So it could be those spirits or a similar approach there. And then the final thought I had was it just could be orcs, and they just could, because we've seen orcs with kind of glowing eyes before, like reflecting light or moonlight in this instance maybe. But I'm prepared for something a little bit more supernatural.
We see a blonde elf. You mentioned it could be Celeborn, but
I don't think it's Celeborn. I think canonically, I think Celeborn does not have blonde hair. I think he has brown hair. He's a Noldor or a Sindar.
Yeah. Our next scene, we believe, is in Numenor. We see an individual with bloody hands and painted green fingernails. I thought it could be a Morgoth worshiper because we know at this point in Numenor, Sauron is beginning to sow Morgoth worship into the populace, and they begin to like conduct human sacrifice and a bunch of that kind of stuff. So we could be seeing that for the first time.
Mm-hmm. And then very soon, or the very next scene, we get another one of these kind of seemingly inanimated objects. These look like they might be flower petals kind of floating through the air very rapidly, a large number of them, as if it is a creature or it is being animated by a will. And the setting could either be Khazad-dûm. It does look slightly dwarvish, but then the lighting looks a little off for Khazad-dûm, so it could be Numenor. And then it might be connected to the previous image with the bloody hands, because there looked like there could have been petals with the bloody hands, and it could be the same thing. Is this a manifestation of Morgoth or Sauron's power? Could be. I think in the lore, nobody on Numenor worshipped Morgoth until Sauron got there, which would require him to have been captured or willingly gone to Numenor.
He's already been there.
He's been there once. So did he have like a malign influence while he was there? Is there maybe we already see kind of some of the negative aspects of the Numenorian society? Are there people there who are already kind of trending in this direction? That would certainly probably speed things along when we get Sauron in place. But then we start getting our first voiceover at this point, where I think it says something like, he worms his way into your mind, as we see an image of tree roots very quickly moving, growing across the ground. And when we paused, we each thought it kind of the background looked like it was that grove of trees in Lindon with the statues. Do you still think that, Sean?
Yes.
Okay. So we might have some.
Yeah, nothing is
teaser trailer, folks.
Yeah, nothing has come out to change my mind. Yes, I still think it's Lindon, and we think that because we have our scenes in season 1 where Galadriel is mourning her brother. That looks like the exact same lighting. In the background, we see like a walkway with that overarching tree branches that looks almost exactly like the memorial area of Lindon. So yeah, that's what we're thinking. You mentioned that it looks like Stranger Things imagery with just like the darkness, the different creatures that we're seeing so far as well, like that venom worm monster. What else do you have to say about that?
Well, I thought the venom monster, the petals moving very deliberately as if it's animated by an intelligence, the tree roots growing very quickly. All of those things reminded me of Stranger Things. I think we saw that in really all of the more recent seasons of, I can't remember how many seasons of Stranger Things there have been, but there are these seemingly more of these like cosmic entities that manifest themselves on Earth as these collections of smaller particles or animals or things like that. And it was very similar. And I should say too, it's not really something from Tolkien. We don't really see these more horror aspects of Tolkien. Even when it's hinted at that trees have their own self-awareness. It's either Ents or it's maybe Old Man Willow from the Old Forest, and it's the tree itself is kind of moving, but it's not shooting roots out over the ground, moving very rapidly, seemingly. So yet to be seen what this is. Is this corruption? Is this corruption from Sauron? Is it something like related to the decay of the elves? Is it something else entirely? We'll see.
Next up, we have an army of orcs walking through some woods, and then a cut to Celebrimbor, who we think is looking at Sauron. We see what reminds me of the Hobbit imagery when Gandalf is looking at Sauron in Dol Guldur.
I think there's even like a slight silhouette
of a person, but we don't know if that's Sauron or not. But it reminds me a lot of the Hobbit imagery used for Sauron. So I could see that being the case. And then we also have that voiceover say, he's been here this whole time. And then we cut to our version of Anatar, Lord of Gifts, we could imagine. which is just Hallbrand in a silver wig and pointy ears. So we'll talk about reactions afterwards, but that's pretty much what we see.
Okay, next scene, it appears to be, well, I think it's definitely Galadriel, maybe Elrond. They seem to be riding horses very quickly through the woods. Then we cut to a woman in the water. This might be Miriel, but can't say for sure. Her face was partially obscured by her hair, and a large kraken-like creature is menacing her. Do you think this is the same creature from the season one? The kind of the, I can't remember what they called it, but the large creature
Like
that attacked the raft.
I think they called it like a sea dragon or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
I don't know. This looks like a kraken to me.
It does. It looks slightly different. Like, and that thing like seemed like it had to be swimming around to be menacing, and this looks like it's more of like an octopus.
Stationary, yeah.
Yeah, which kind of that would fit into some of the other imagery we've had of monsters and kind of menacing things with the like amorphous pseudopod-like construction. Tentacles, pseudopods, kind of all the same thing.
Yep. Then we get a voiceover that says every soul in Middle Earth is in peril, and we have a couple different cutscenes here. We have Durin's wife Disa looking sad, Durin's dad, and then we see Khazad-dûm kind of under attack. At the same instance, we see Elendil in a crowd reaching for something or someone in Numenor, and then Galadriel screaming and then reaching for somebody in a red environment, if I recall, at that scene.
Yeah, like a fire in the background. Yeah. And was
like
was she wearing that blue dress as well? Yeah. That blue outfit? Okay.
Yeah, she was not in combat garb. She was in laid back elf garb. And then the end of that voiceover of Every Soul Middle Earth is in Peril, we see an orc licking a knife and then a siege engine in the background.
Okay. Then we get an aerial shot. We think it's Eregion. If there's a chance it could be Numenor, but we're pretty sure it's Eregion, especially based on some of the later shots. We get a shot of the 3 elven rings being worn by who we assume to be Galadriel, Elrond, and, well, who do you think is the third? Do you think it's Celebrimbor wearing the 3rd elven ring?
Yes, I would imagine, yeah.
I would imagine so too, but all right. And then we have the King Durin of the dwarves picking up a large ring. We think this could be one of the dwarvish rings. And then we get reintroduced to our good friend Arondir doing some more, I called it Kung Fu, but it's not Kung Fu. I think he was doing capoeira, the Brazilian martial arts, off of a cart. And then when we paused this scene, we saw Isildur in the background. So Arondir and Isildur will meet up somewhere in the Southlands, we're assuming.
Then we cut back to Numenor, where we see a giant eagle landing. And we see Pharazôn also drawing a sword. So it could be he's either riding it, like the eagle brought him to this location, or he is threatening it. It doesn't really tell you either way. We have a cut to Bronwyn's son Theo looking sad, probably because he caused the downfall of his home. And then Isildur also looking rough. And if we recall, Isildur had been left in the Mordor area. So he is kind of in survival mode. And then we have Eregion under attack. We see a city walled kind of on a body of water, and then flaming catapults and siege engines shooting projectiles at the city.
All right, and we cut to the Adar character with some orcs behind him. This is the new actor portraying Adar. That he's in decent amount of makeup. They did their best to make him look like the Joseph Mawle version of the character. I think he looks just like undead Benjen Stark from the later seasons of Game of Thrones. We think this is at the Siege of Eregion. It could be at a different confrontation, but it looks like they're about to do some fighting. We then cut to the stranger / Gandalf hitting the ground with a staff. I think this, you know what? This could be the Petals location. I think that the lighting looks similar and that architecture could match the architecture from the stranger scenes. And then that quickly cuts to, looks like Nori holding onto a rope during a sandstorm, or maybe this is a magical storm of some variety. But then we quickly cut away from that and get back to Galadriel shooting some fire arrows, at least 2 fire arrows. And there's a person on the ground. They could be dead. It could be one of those elves that she was with in her Avengers scene earlier.
Mm-hmm. We would imagine those elves those arrows that she shot lead to the next scene where we see a bunch of orcs getting exploded. Then we cut to Elrond in battle armor leading a cavalry charge. And then Celebrimbor dropping some rings into a fire or forge. And at this point, he's looking pretty rough. He looks bruised. He looks dirty. And we can imagine in the same scene, which is the next scene that we're shown in the trailer, we have Halbrand, aka Anatar, aka Sauron, amidst the ruins of the forge, and he's being held at sword point.
And then over the scene, we have Galadriel's voiceover saying, "He is Sauron." And then we cut to his hands, and they look like they're doing magic as if to push back, repulse the people who have held him at sword point. And then we cut to, I think this is the final scene in the trailer. There's kind of an explosion of ice emanating from a tower or a small fortress. I initially thought that this was that fortress in the Forodwaith. I believe at some point we've called it a Tumno. There's no confirmation that it is a Tumno, but that was my initial thought. After some consideration, it seems like maybe this is at different locations. The landscape in the background looks different. It looks a much smaller, confined scene. Could be wrong. They could be redoing it, but it did look like there was some sort of supernatural explosion of ice and snow.
And then we get the announcement that season 2 comes out August 29th. Overall thoughts. I'll lead this off, Sam.
Go for it.
What a bunch of bullshit. Just every complaint that we've had about season 1, there's no course correction. It seems. And when we know Sauron has the ability to shapeshift, clearly he does, because he's taking the appearance of Halbrand as a human in season 1. And we know Sauron can look like a large evil lord as well, like a Lord of Dread or whatever you want to call it. And when season 2, when their answer for infiltrating the elves again as an elf, like Lord of Gifts, this Anatar character, when your answer to that in the show is just putting Halbrand in a wig, like, what are we doing?
Yeah, this is Clark Kent, Superman disguise level of dumb, where it's like, oh, what's the difference between Clark Kent and Superman? His glasses. Right? Like,
and a suit.
So, yeah. So they are going to have to work really hard to establish how Celebrimbor is this stupid. And maybe the gimmick is we, the audience, see Halbrand. We see Charlie Vickers, but the conceit is that he's actually disguised as somebody else, and they just didn't want to recast. Like that has been done. I don't think it's a good way to do it. They really painted themselves into a corner. I mean, people are going to look back at season 1 and be like, "What the hell were you doing?" But I should say too, we don't know if the trailer had so few plot points. This was really just a couple of images that we think we know where they're from. We don't know if this trailer is taking scenes from the entire season or just a few episodes. I think a common practice is to make your trailer from the first few episodes or maybe the first half of the season. But if that's the case, then that means the first half of this season is going to include the Balrog emerging and attacking, causing destruction in Khazad-dûm, seemingly the fall of Eregion, and at least the escalation of things in Numenor. I mean, Pharazôn drawing a sword in the throne room in Numenor is an escalation no matter what the context.
If we're correct that we have Morgoth worship, and
Yep.
he's attacking one of the eagles of Manwë. Like,
Yeah, that would be big. That's why I kind of think that eagle flying in might be him. That he might be riding it, but that doesn't make any
it
sense
makes
given
no
what we
sense
know.
at
Like
all.
the eagles they're not just big animals, they're servants of the gods of the setting, and they help people who deserve and need their help. The eagles arriving as a reward for somebody doing the right thing and being in a desperate circumstance. So I don't know how Farazan would qualify. So that has its own questions. And then the regarding the Morgoth worship, the having now seen those two quick snippets of the stranger and Nori, and I think they were traveling toward, was it Rune that they were going toward? What was it?
They were going east, I think, is
East.
all we really know.
Yeah, they were going east. I think this might be them encountering somebody in the east who was worshiping Sauron, because that's what those three people were telling the stranger when they thought he was Sauron. Like, you need to go east and discover yourself, like rediscover yourself, and that's where he's going, but not to rediscover him, or not to get in with Sauron, but seemingly to get to the mystery of his own existence. I think this might be what we see, is that him and Nori encountering Morgoth worshippers.
One of my only hopes is that when they go east, we finally get to see some blue elves or blue wizards.
Blue wizards, that could be cool.
Like, if we see blue wizards, I'd be okay. But overall, like, I was really hoping that we would watch this trailer, the first trailer for season 2, and I would begin to at least see signs that showrunners were at least recognizing concerns that people had. And after I watched this trailer, like you said, it could just be like from a couple episodes, but I have no hope that season 2 is going to be any better, and if it might be worse. Because if Halbrand, like I said, if their answer to Anatar is just putting Halbrand in a wig, then that opens up so many more concerns about how stupid the fucking elves are. And like we said with season 1, they are supposed to be like the wisest, and Galadriel included, are supposed to be like the wisest beings in Middle Earth. And how could they be fleeced so badly twice by a guy who looks exactly the same as he fleeced them the first time?
Yeah, well, and we don't get any I'm stammering right now because they made so many mistakes with season 1, where there has to be basically zero time passed, right? When we see Elendil, he's wearing the same armor he was wearing during the excursion to the Southlands. We see Isildur and Arondir basically wearing the exact same things they were wearing, and probably very close to the same location where we left them. There's no reason to think like, oh, it's been a while and like the elves fading is still happening. Like, where's the motivation going to come from for Celebrimbor to just accept Halbrand / Anatar?
Unless we get some House of Dragon, like 6 years have passed or something like that.
I don't think they would do that. You know what I'm thinking now is that we had that one voiceover saying he worms his way into your mind. I wonder if the idea is going to be that Celebrimbor and maybe some of the other elves in Eregion are being duped by Halbrand into thinking he is somebody else, and he doesn't change his appearance. He changes the way that he is perceived by them.
I don't know. We'll see.
That could be it. Okay.
Last thoughts? Because I'm tapped out. I'm just frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the Khazad-dûm stuff. I don't like the Balrog. That was not something that happened canonically in the Second Age. That was the Third Age thing. This is thousands of years before it should be. And if this is a lot for one season, the fall of Khazad-dûm, the fall of Eregion, those, especially if this is just one half of the season, I don't know what they're doing. Like, what is the show actually going to be about? Because they're moving very quickly toward the War of the Last Alliance, which could be cool, but we've seen that already in a lot of ways, right? That we've seen that in the prologue to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and Galadriel didn't do anything in the War of the Last Alliance. So Yeah, I don't know. I think we're still that bitter taste from season one is still in our
Alive and
mouths.
well. Yeah, my final comment is show looks great though. I mean, it looks, the cinematography is fantastic. The orcs look awesome, but the rest of the show is burning pile of feces. That was episode.
Oh, no, we have one
77.
more.
Oh,
One more announcement.
Oh, that's right.
So some good news, especially for you Amazon Prime subscribers, is that The Legend of Vox Machina Season 3 will premiere at some point this fall. So hopefully it'll be there as a palate cleanser after you've watched The Rings of Power. You can turn on Legend of Vox Machina Season 3 and see some good quality fantasy, some good action, some comedy, and plots that make sense.
And with that, that was episode 77 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. You can follow us on Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We have a Facebook group, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things Podcast. You can email us at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. And I believe that's everything.
We will see you next week for episode 78, episodes 9 and 10 of season 1, House of the Dragon. Bye.